iOS fans, or should I say newcomers to the hobby of Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000. My name is Robin, I'm part of Agents of Sigmar, and we're starting a new series today aimed at parents of children who are getting into Warhammer. And I can remember my parents when I used to talk to them about Warhammer, and they used to kind of didn't know what on earth it was talking about. When they wanted to go into the Games Workshop, or what are now called Warhammer stores, they didn't know what they were talking about or what they were doing. That was all a bit intimidating. So I mean, Games Workshop's changed a lot in that time, but I want to try and break down some of those barriers, particularly with there's a brand new 9th edition of the game arriving soon. Now I'm going to be doing several videos of these, and if they're popular, obviously there'll be more and more videos. Today I'm doing an overview of what the hobby is, what Warhammer 40,000 is specifically. There are two strands. There's Warhammer Age of Sigmar, which is in a fantasy setting, and there's Warhammer 40,000, which is in a science fiction setting, so with sort of laser guns and things like that. That's what I'm going to be talking to you today about, and the reason for that is there is a brand new version called Indomitus 9th edition coming in 2 or 3 weeks time. I'm not quite sure of the date, but it's Games Workshop have been really hyping it on their social media and on their Warhammer community website. And I will say before I go any further, the Warhammer community website is a really great place to go for any information you want about the games, or on Facebook. They've got a Facebook page. But that is the official kind of line, and you'll find all sorts of information there. Although I would say it's a little bit aimed specifically at people who are already into the hobby. So maybe there's a little bit of barrier to entry there if you're brand new and don't know what any of this is. And that's kind of what the purpose of these videos is to try and break that down so you feel a little bit more confident about this new, slightly bewildering but frankly fantastic hobby that your child has become excited by. Or it might not be your child, it might be your partner. You want to find out more about what on earth they're doing. But if you're a total noob, as they're called, totally new to the hobby, then this will maybe break down a few barriers and help explain a few things. So where shall we start? Well, maybe your child has been to Scouts. Games Workshop have affiliated with the Scouts. They do a badge with them. I'm not quite sure which badge it is, but it might be a collecting badge, or it might be a crafty, creative badge. But they get to paint a model, assemble a model and paint a model and bring it home. So maybe they've been fired up by the stuff they brought home with that. Perhaps you've been out shopping one day and they were waiting for you outside John Lewis or something, and it happened to be next door to a Warhammer shop, and they were looking in the window at all these amazingly intricately painted figures, and there's big vehicles and things, and they wanted to go in, and so you said, oh well, go on then, we'll go in, we've got 5 minutes to kill. And then you found out there was an incredibly enthusiastic Games Workshop staff member, or Warhammer staff member, and they showed you how to paint the model, and you brought your painting model home, and now they've sown the seeds, they want more. That's how it works. Or perhaps he's just talked about it at school and his friends are into it, and word of mouth has got him into this hobby, and he's talking about it and you don't know anything about it. So that's where we're starting from today. I mean, you may have heard about the amazing cool things that the hobby's got. It's laser guns and people with big chainsaws and motorbikes and things. These are the things my kids love about the hobby. And they may be banding about cool but indecipherable names. Like, I mean, the new box set's going to be called Indomitus. What on earth does that mean? There are Ultramarines, there are Dark Angels, there are Sisters of Battle, all these kind of incredibly evocative names which are entirely meaningless if you don't know what they are. So that's where we're looking at. Your kids may have been talking about huge giant fighting robots, and it's all entirely cool and you can completely see why they're into it, but you don't understand it. So you go into the shop, you have a look, and oh my god, these prices are terrifying. What on earth are we buying into? Yes, I have to say the hobby is not cheap. If your child does go down this route, it is going to cost them some pocket money. They're going to be saving up, which in itself isn't a bad thing. It can teach them how to save for things and really cherish what it is that they're after. But the buy-in to this hobby, although it's quite small if you want to start off small, if you want to expand it, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger, like most hobbies do. So what is Warhammer 40,000? Well, it's many things to many people. Firstly, it's basics. It was first created, its first edition came out about 30 years ago, and it's evolved a lot since then, and more miniatures have come out, and the process of making the miniatures has got simpler. So the miniatures have got better and better and better. And it's set in, as I said, in the 41st millennium, so that's the 40,000 is it's 41st millennium, but it's the year 40,000. And you'll often hear that abbreviated to 40k, and people quite often, you'll either hear Warhammer 40k or 40k, much more than you'll hear Warhammer 40,000. And it was created in Nottingham by these slightly geeky, beardy guys, and it's a product of its time. So it was created in the 1980s. It's a sort of dystopian vision of the future where there is only war. So it brings a pretty dark in the 41st millennium, and that's something you do have to consider. Some of the themes of the games, although they have softened a little over the years, some of the themes of the games are a little bit dark, and if your child is sensitive, you might want to look into that a little bit. But aside from that, it's a very welcoming hobby, and it's really good fun. And there are three main reasons why people are into it. The first one is the game itself. It's a war game. It's a miniatures tabletop game, and you get the figures and you have your little ruler and you move them and you roll dice, and depending on what the dice rolls are, you might kill your opponent's men or they might kill yours, and that's the fun. That's the fun of it. And it looks great on a tabletop, and you know at the end of the day, we're all children at heart, and at the end of the day, we're all just going pew 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 pew, a bit like Star Wars. But don't tell anybody I said that. Other people don't even play the game. They're really into the hobby. So the hobby is the assembling of the miniatures, the painting of the miniatures, and when you get really into it, building scenery and converting the miniatures, because you don't have to have the miniatures straight out of the box. You can combine parts of models together to make new looking ones, your own personalised ones. You can even get stuff called green stuff, which enables you to mould and create whole new extra bits depending on how good you are at the hobby. I'm not terribly good at the hobby. I tend to just assemble as are and paint them as quick as I can. And then the final third element of the hobby is the lore. That's Lore rather than Law, and that's the history of the book of the game setting, and that's evolved over 30 years. So basically, when it started, these guys were just making up stories as they went along, which is all fine. I mean, that's what all storytellers do, isn't it? But they were making up stories to fit their games, and their characters were evolving in the games, and they would have recurring characters through their games, and it turned into this big, sprawling dystopian story. And there are loads and loads of books written about it, but Games Workshop have its own publishing imprint called the Black Library, and they have loads of books all about Warhammer 40,000. And so some people are really into the lore, and I personally aren't that interested in it. I like the models and I like the game. The lore I find less interesting, and people have different elements of the things they like, and across the board it can change, and I don't know what your child would be into. Mine aren't really interested in the lore at all, and they like the miniatures more than the game itself as well, so they're much more into the hobby side of it, although to be honest it's quite hard to prise them off their Xbox to play anything else. There is a bewildering amount of stuff, and as I've already said, it is going to get expensive. If your children really get into this hobby, it is going to cost them some money. But they are premium products. Games Workshop make the best miniatures out there. Their sculpts are incredible, and they look amazing when they're assembled. Okay, so it is going to cost you some money. I'll be upfront about that. But there are loads of really good reasons why it's good to be into. It is social. You can't play this game on your own, really. I mean, you can, and I did when I was younger, because there aren't always, when you're a teenager or a child, there aren't always people around to play with you, and you can. Children are much better at just making up their own games, aren't they, on their own? But they will be able to play it with their friends, and they will meet new people doing it. You can go to the Games Workshop stores. They all are pretty much all have beginners afternoons, normally on a Sunday, I think, where you can go and play. They can go and play the game and learn how to play and meet other people who like to play the game. It's creative. It's creative in so many ways. So there's obviously the art aspect. There's the building the models and painting the models. That in itself is very creative. And then there's the imagination, the stories. There's all this lore around it, but you can create your own lore, your own stories, your own heroes, so it's incredibly creative, so both from an artistic and an imaginative point of view. Having said that, it's got a very strategic element as well, because there's lots of planning involved, where you're going to place your miniatures on the board, how you're going to react to what your opponent does, which each force has different skills involved that they can use, and you have to decide which ones you can deploy at any time, which ones you're going to employ at any one time. So there's that strategic element, and even before the game, when you get really into it, you have to design what your army is going to be before it even arrives on the battlefield, and that takes place at home. And while you think about that, and there's a whole kind of thought process in your head all the time, potentially, of how you want to, or how your child will want to run their game, and then working out therefore what models they need to buy to make that happen, all that kind of thing. So there's a planning aspect of it. And it's really good for sportsmanship because you know, you're not going to win every game. You've got to learn to take the rough with the smooth. You've got to learn to take terrible dice rolls, and some people are better at that than others. So they will learn the sportsmanship element of it too. It's good for maths as well. There's lots of dice rolling and adding up and probabilities and things. So you do a little bit of maths work for them too. And if they do get into the lore, it's good for reading. I mean, even if they don't get into the lore, even the rule book itself is reasonably thick, and it's good for reading and deciphering information. And if they do get into this whole Black Library world of books, there's so many books to read that they can kind of inspire their hobby and then be inspired to read by their hobby. So that's a really nice dovetail, which is quite important for parents. I think these days it's quite hard necessarily to get their children to read. And this is a reason. This might spur them to read. If they do get into it, they are going to bend your ear about stuff. You know this already. Your children may have been into Pokemon or, I don't know, Transformers or something, and they will have bent your ear about it. They will have an exhaustive knowledge, and you think, how can they possibly tell me anything else? And they will, and they'll keep going. That will happen. There are endless factions in the game. There are weapons, there are stats, and there are heroes, and there are villains, and there are stories, and they will tell you them all the time. And even if you're really into it, eventually it will drive you botty. But that's because they're excited about it. So that is it really. That is Warhammer 40,000. It's a tabletop war game, so they will need some space to play it, but the floor is fine. You have to be careful with the models on the floor because if they get trodden on, they get broken easily. So that's something. So a table is better. We'll talk about tabletop and what you can do to sort of quickly throw up some sort of game, because the scenery they display in the rule books and things is quite expensive and hard to create or to paint to look that good. But there are very quick and easy ways. So I will hopefully try and cover that in a future video. But that is Warhammer 40,000. It's a tabletop game, as I said, with miniatures, with lots of history behind it, and it's a really great creative outlet as well for your child. So if you do have any comments or questions about the hobby and you want to know something, or you'd like to see a video about a certain subject that you don't understand or you want to know more about, then do let me know. As I've said, there's going to be at least one new video coming. There's going to be about the new Indomitus box set, which is the new 9th edition. It hasn't changed a great deal from 8th edition. There was a huge change at 8th edition. It hasn't changed that much, but there are some whole new models and things. So we're going to have a look at those in a future video, and then maybe we'll move on to sort of hobby tips and what you had to support your child in the hobby and things, and maybe how playing a game, setting up a tabletop, that kind of thing. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to see, and if you do have any questions about anything Games Workshop, Warhammer, tabletop gaming related, do pop them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer them. If you enjoyed this video, please click the subscribe button and like and everything, because we do love that. And we do have a Facebook page where we're Agents of Sigmar on Facebook, where again we'll answer questions if you drop us a line there. So until we see you next time at some point in the 40,000 universe, goodbye and farewell. Bye.